Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome in to the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis, back at it again. Once again on the podcast to talk about everything football in both college and professional. Alright? College and professional. As we are now officially, when this podcast drops, officially a week away from the NFL season, a Thursday away, might I add, from the NFL season beginning, kicking off with the opener between Kansas City, the defending Super Bowl champions, and the Houston Texans on Thursday night. And then obviously that weekend is the first weekend of NFL football where we get to see all the teams come back and a great week one slate of games. Obviously, you know, on this podcast, Monday, me and Ethan will probably give, you know, our thoughts on the season, everything. And then Thursday, when it's just me, definitely going to give my preview and predictions on the week one games on Sunday, while also recapping the Thursday night game and the opener. But since we are also so close to the season, obviously you do know what a lot of people do around this time. I'm going to give you my predictions and projections for teams and conferences in the coming year. So this segment, we're going to get to the AFC. I'm going to give you my division winners and my thoughts on each division in general. So we're going to do that. And then next segment, we're going to get into the NFC side of things and then end the show with some just general NFL news that's going on around the league. So I guess we can go ahead and jump right into it right here on the podcast. And we're going to go ahead and start with the AFC East. Obviously, this division consists of the New England Patriots without Tom Brady. First year with Cam Newton at the helm, as he looks like he will be the week one starter for the Patriots. Bill Belichick coming back to show that he is the reason why the Patriots have been successful, even though this seems like his least talented roster he's ever had since he's been in New England. And we'll have to see, obviously, where they end up at the end of the season. Some people are still a little nervous to rule the Patriots out because it's the Patriots. You don't want to say it's done, it's over for them, and then they shock the world and go 10-6 and win the AFC East. Then you also have the New York Jets, a team that's always been mediocre to bad ever since the Rex Ryan years. Haven't made the playoffs since, I believe, 2012, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that. But maybe 2012 was the last time. And basically, the Jets have been a big wallow of just, they have some guys, but it's just, they don't ever seem like they can get over the top. There are some issues between, they've lost Jamal Adams and they've lost C.J. Mosley this season. Sam Darnold's coming into his third year. Everybody's expecting him to take that leap. Obviously, we remember last year was cut short by mono. And the Jets are expected to really be better this year, but how much better, we don't know. In this division of the AFC East, where I believe this is probably one of the most wide open divisions in all of the NFL, maybe if they get some things going their way, they may be able to shock a couple people and get to pick some wins up at the end of the day. The Miami Dolphins, also second year under Brian Flores, drafted their quarterback of the future, Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, week one, it looks like Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be the starting quarterback against the Patriots in the opener. But Tua will probably hit the field at some point this year. We just don't know when. So obviously a lot of people are wondering about that and when they're going to let him hit the field. Obviously they have a lot of new talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Brian Flores' specialty. And people wonder where they're going to be when that time comes. So obviously that's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on in Miami, as they are another team I feel like some people are saying right now they feel like an 8-8, 7-9 team, but with the talent that they possess, and if people develop the right way, Miami could be better than expected. And then obviously the favorite of the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills, obviously coming back. Josh Allen in his third year, looking to improve another year. Sean McDermott, I feel like, is one of the best coaches in all of the NFL with the way he goes about, his coaching ability, making adjustments. Obviously, their defense is still going to be one of the better defenses in all of the NFL. Will keep them in a lot of games. And they may have added one big playmaker this offseason, and Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is a guy who probably over the top is going to create a lot of big plays for them. He's also on my fantasy team, so I need him to create big plays. But the point is that with him being added to the team, John Brown is a very good number 2 guy with Cole Beasley underneath. They have all the weapons, especially with also Devin Singletary in the backfield, to really make something happen offensively. Buffalo should be a much better team offensively this year, and that could result for big things for them moving forward. But if I had to rank this division and who I had to say who was going to win it, right now I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills to win this division. I think that they're just the best team at the end of the day, the most complete team out of all these teams. And so I think within the AFC East, I think they'll probably go 4-2. So I'm sure they're going to probably sweep one of the teams, but I also feel like they're going to split with with 2 others. If I had to go with my runner-up, I'm actually going to go with the Miami Dolphins with the second place team. I'm going to go New England third and the Jets fourth in my AFC East divisional predictions in that regard. But now we're going to go to the next AFC division, the AFC West. Obviously, this consists of Kansas City. It consists of Kansas City. It consists of the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Denver Broncos. So, if you think about it like this, the Denver Broncos, I'm going to start with them first because they're the team that everybody has their eye on as the sneaky team, the team that could rise up through the ranks, no pun intended, to the Falcons. And they're the team that people think is going to come out and may not win the division just because Kansas City is in it. But they definitely could be a very solid second team coming out of the AFC West. With Drew Lock coming into this year, his first full year as the starter, showing the flashes that he did at the end of last year, adding Jared Jeudy, adding Hamler, adding Melvin Gordon, with Philip Lindsay and Cortland Sutton, with Von Miller on the other end, with Bradley Chubb coming back in this defense. It seems like the formula is there for Denver to definitely make some noise this year. But like I said, all the pressure's on Drew Lock to live up to his second year billing. Sometimes quarterbacks struggle in their second year. We'll see where Drew Lock is at the end of it. The Las Vegas Raiders are also a very intriguing team. Obviously, there's been a lot of noise about them this offseason. Obviously, since they're in Las Vegas from a league perspective, the league wants them to be good because of the fact that they're in a market that they just broke into and they want to become big there. So there's a lot of pressure on them just from the league's and market perspective, but on the field as well, because Marcus Mariota was brought in. People think maybe he's going to come in and replace Derek Carr. Derek Carr came out, said he's tired of people doubting him, tired of people being against him, and he has a chip on his shoulder. I knew at one point I was going to say that, but Las Vegas, the Raiders, they actually have a bit of offensive talent. They do have the reigning runner-up for Rookie Offensive Player of the Year in Josh Jacobs. They have one of the best offensive lines, probably one of the top 5 offensive lines in all of the NFL. They added Henry Ruggs for deep threat, a guy who can make big plays. They want him to be their Tyreek Hill. And they really have some talent offensively. Darren Waller was a breakout tight end last year. Offensively, if they are able to be a ship that can keep running and really carry this team. Their biggest issue was on the defensive side of the ball and their secondary. Their secondary has to hold up this year, or else potentially all of the expectations that came with the team might end up going for naught, especially in a new market. Next up, the LA Chargers. Obviously, the Chargers coming into the year already have said Tyrod Taylor will be their week 1 starter. So a lot of people are also expecting Justin Herbert to hit the field at some point. We don't know when, but it's an expectation. Obviously, with Justin Herbert, it's going to be very interesting to kind of see what happens. You know, for me, the Chargers have always been a team that they have the talent. They have the physical talent on that roster to be a top team. It's just, people don't know, is it coaching? Is it situational? They struggle in late game situations. They somehow always find out how to lose in close games in many different ways. After going 13-3 2 years ago, they regressed this year. Phillip Rivers is no longer there. There's a lot of pressure on Anthony Lynn to win this year. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with LA this year, because there is a lot of things that have to happen. Remember, they're in one of the biggest markets in LA, and I'm sure the league would definitely want them as well to be able to come out there and really show out and really give the LA fan base a reason to support this team and help their money within the league, but also help the Chargers really grow up and be that great brand they expect them to be for them. And then obviously the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions. I mean, what's to say? They're the favorites in the AFC. It just depends if you rather prefer that or Baltimore, but they're really the favorites in the AFC. You know what you're getting. Patrick Mahomes, considered the best quarterback in all of the NFL. You have some of the best weapons in all of the NFL. Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman. They're deep. And that deepness is why a lot of people see them as such a threat. And I think it should be granted as such. They are a threat. They are definitely a threat to a lot of teams, in the NFL once again. Obviously, the biggest thing I think that helped them last year was on the defensive end. They got turnovers. And they played better down the stretch when it was needed. It almost is like this. It really doesn't, in a way, matter how your offense played. I mean, not your offense, but your defense played at the beginning of the season. If your defense comes together late, that's when you need it most. And if they do that, they'll be completely fine. So that's the entire AFC West overview. If I had to pick a divisional winner, obviously I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs to win this division at 1. I just think they're the superiorly better team. And unless they have major injury concerns, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to even be a top 1 or 2 seed in the entire AFC. At number 2 in the division, I have the Denver Broncos. I think Denver's going to finish with at least 10 wins this year, or at most 10 to 11 wins this year. I'm going to say that. I think they just have all this talent. They have a great formula how to win games. And I think if they stay healthy, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to reach that expectation. At 3rd, I have the LA Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to play better. Remember, that 7th playoff spot is going to make it very interesting, because before, yes, 2 playoff teams from the same division that are not one of the top 4 seeds can make it in. But now, especially, Chargers could be a team that sneaks in to that 7th spot. And then obviously, lastly, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, a lot of people don't hope for that. But this is a very tough division. Any of these teams you really don't maybe view as a 4th place team. But somebody got to be 4th place, and I'm just going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders when it comes to that. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to continue with our AFC overview of the divisions and my thoughts and winners, and then we'll move on to the NFC during the show. So stay tuned for all that right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Brice, here to tell you about my favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. I only endorse one sports book, and that's BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid. You need a sports book that's going to offer everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. Call today at 1-800-MyBetUS. That's 1-800-MyBetUS, and they will talk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you can get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. I bet at BetUS, and so should you. Join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com or call 1-800-MyBetUS. Mention GSMC to get 150 in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we were discussing AFC divisions, conferences, my predictions, and rankings of each team in their respective conferences. We got through two. We're going to get through the last two this segment and might even be able to get to the NFC side of things by the end of the segment as well, as we're going to keep this as a very free-flowing show throughout the podcast. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. The next team, or the next division, I might say, in the AFC, we're going to get into is the AFC North. Obviously, this is considered maybe one of the most talented divisions in all of the NFL, consisting of the Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals first. Obviously, Joe Burrow, the man who is supposed to save Cincinnati and bring them to the promised land after doing that for LSU this past year, having one of the greatest statistical seasons, or one of the greatest seasons overall that a player has ever had in college history. He was drafted number 1 overall. Cincinnati is a team to me that has offensive talent. They have Joe Mixon, who they just gave a new extension to. They just paid their star running back. They also have A.J. Green coming back. If he can stay healthy, we know how A.J. Green could be. Taj Boyd, a receiver that really could break out and play well for them. You know, he's a part of it. Tate as well. They have weapons on the offensive end of the ball that can make plays. And so they're definitely in position to me to be better from a roster perspective this year. But will that result in a better record on the field? I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the NFL again this year. I don't. But I also don't feel like they're going to be top. Just because first, there's still holes on this roster. A lot of holes on this roster. Second, we don't know how good Zach Taylor is as a head coach yet. If Joe Burrow has a good rookie year with this team, you could at least say, even with the record, hey, they know they have a good QB coach combination. It worked. It clicked. Now they just got to fill out the rest of the roster, and Cincinnati could be a team to be reckoned with the next year. But for the most part, this is more of a year, I think, for Cincinnati to figure things out and see where they are as a roster before they make any decisions on Zach Taylor, and also before we make any judgments on Joe Burrow. Because they're playing in one of the toughest divisions in all of the NFL. Next, the Cleveland Browns, obviously probably one of the teams that has the most pressure on them, even though they haven't won anything in a very long time, because of the pressure to start winning something and because of the talent they possess. Obviously, we know about the debacle that happened last year in Cleveland with Freddie Kitchens and how Baker struggled. This offseason, they hired a new head coach, Kevin Stefanski from Minnesota. Offensively, they're one of the most talented groups in all of the NFL with Hooper, Njoku, Beckham, Landry, Kareem Hunt, and Nick Chubb. And they signed Jack Conklin for one tackle spot and drafted another one for the other tackle spot. So then, because that was the biggest weakness on their entire offensive line. So I have always said that a lot of the pressure this year is going to be on Baker Mayfield because he now is in position where there can't be that many excuses. A lot of people are saying around the league, if he struggles this year, the team could be looking to move on. Because usually after the third year for rookie players, teams will decide to pick up your option. If they do that, that usually means that they're content with you or they like you, so that they're willing to play you. Because usually that fifth year is also one of the higher paid years a rookie can get on his deal, is that fifth year. That's why every rookie would like to have that fifth year option picked up. So obviously, if they decide not to pick up Baker's fifth year option, that should kind of tell you how they're viewing Baker Mayfield after this season. But they have a lot of talent on the offensive side. They also I feel like have one of the better front sevens, underrated front sevens in all of the NFL. And listen, they're going to have to play good. They're going to have to play better. If they don't, there really could be a change at quarterback next year. And maybe on the offensive side of the ball in general, potentially. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But next team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh is a team that a lot of people are not sure about. What is Pittsburgh? And that answer really just relies on Ben Roethlisberger. What is Ben Roethlisberger going to be this year? That's going to be the big question moving on forward. Because if Ben Roethlisberger struggles this year, there's going to be questions about, has he hit that cliff? Has he gone over that cliff that a quarterback who they say gets older, I believe he's almost 38, hits and you see the decline? Is it that they don't have enough offensive weapons? Like, I always have questioned the offensive weaponry that Pittsburgh has. Because I think James Conner is a good back. I don't think he's a great back. Juju, I mean, he was hurt, so obviously that's the first question, can he stay healthy? And second, okay, when he stays healthy, can he have a bounce-back year? The other receivers, they have some young talent at receiver, but we don't know if any of them actually are going to be consistent, good receivers. But their offensive line is still probably one of the better offensive lines in all of the league. And so offensively, it's going to be on Ben. He has to play well. If not, there's going to be questions about if he can be the guy to lead this team into the future, or does Pittsburgh really desperately need to start going and looking for a replacement for Big Ben very, very soon? And then obviously the last team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously the favorites in this division. Lamar Jackson coming off an MVP year. This will be technically his second full year as the starter. And listen, it feels like he can only go up from here and do even better. Obviously, the biggest thing for him right now is to continue in building his success, become a better passer, and then when playoff time comes around, win a playoff game. I don't feel like we need to look at this, he needs to win the Super Bowl. But he needs to win a playoff game to at least feel like, okay, I've won one, so I know I'm capable of winning one and building that confidence. This team is absolutely stacked on both sides of the ball, running backs, receivers, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, corners. This team looks like they should be in the Super Bowl, or at least in the AFC Championship game, competing with the Kansas City Chiefs for that spot. Because they're absolutely stacked offensively, and there's really just not that much to say. Because they don't have a lot of things around them that you're worried about. You just feel like they just got to reach expectations. Their biggest, I guess, flaw is expectations in terms of pressure. they have to deal with the pressure this year being that good and actually not coming onto the scene and being 13-3 now, knowing everybody knows, oh, they're a great team, so you're going to get every team's best shot. But if I had to give my divisional rankings, I'll go with Baltimore first. I just feel like they're the best team in the entire division. I'm actually going to go with Cleveland number 2 here. I think they're going to have a better season under Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, and I think that will be good enough to get the 2 spot in the AFC North. 3, I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sorry, all my Pittsburgh fans out there. That's just the way it looks to me. And then lastly, I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals. And then the last division we're going to get into here on the podcast, the AFC South. Some people consider it one of the lowliest divisions in recent memory, based off the last few years of teams basically not really having to have a great record and making the playoffs from this division. The division consists of the Houston Texans, Tennessee Titans, Indianapolis Colts, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, if you look at the Jaguars, I mean, they have stripped the team down. Leonard Fournette just got cut. They obviously traded away some of the best defensive players like A.J. Bouye, Calais Campbell. They also just traded away Njoku, or Ejaku, or however, sorry, I mispronounced his name, to the Vikings. They look like this is a true rebuilding process. I said in my show with Ethan on Tuesday that I think what they're doing is just rebuilding and tanking for Lawrence. I think they're tanking for Lawrence. They're like, Gardner Minshew is a good placeholder, but we're tanking. We want to go 2-14 this year. I think that's another reason why they didn't want to bring in a new head coach. Because instead of bringing in a new head guy and telling him, hey, we need you to win 2 games in your first year as the head coach, they're just like, listen, Doug Marrone is our scapegoat. We already know this isn't going to work for him. He's not going to be here long term. I think they already know this is planned out. He's going to be fired in this year. They know they're going to do it. They just can obviously give another justified reason. Well, we went 2-14, so we need to be in a new direction. Because I'm sure they're like, we don't want to bring in a new guy, and then him coming off a bad season, and then trying to tell him, hey, now we need you to start winning the next year. Because not every coach sometimes can do that. Plus, with all the uncertainty with COVID-19, obviously COVID when it happened wasn't necessarily big at the moment, but I feel like they just felt like for continuity's sakes, we're just going to go ahead and keep him as the head coach. And so I am not expecting a lot out of the Jaguars, and I really feel bad for Gardner Minshew because I feel like, I'm not saying he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but I feel like, you always want to feel like you want to put him in the best position to succeed. You never want to put him in situations where he's set up to fail. The next team, obviously, is the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is a team that people don't know how good they're going to be this year. Obviously, they came in late last season after starting 3-5, made it to the playoffs, and made it to the AFC Championship game behind Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. People think Tannehill is going to come back to earth this year, and what you saw in the playoffs is going to be what you see during the regular season. And also, teams are obviously going to set their defenses up to stop Derrick Henry on a week-to-week basis. And so some people think that Tennessee won't be as good as they were last year, but I won't go ahead and say something like that because I think Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the NFL that we don't talk about. And remember, he comes from the Bill Belichick tree. Remember, he was a player under Bill Belichick for years, and I think he'll get these guys ready to go and get them ready to compete again to make the playoffs. And then we have the Houston Texans. Obviously, we know with Deshaun Watson, they're obviously looking to try to get a new extension done before the season begins. They've obviously traded away their number 1 receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, but brought in wide receiver Brandon Cooks. Also got David Johnson in that trade. Offensively, they've always been a good team. I still expect them to be a good offensive team. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is going to make them just one of the worstest teams ever created offensively. I just think defensively, they obviously have to be better. Defensively, they've struggled. Hopefully, J.J. Watt can stay healthy. They do have 2 guys up front who can rush the passer. It's kind of the same situation, almost like the Raiders. Just secondary-wise, they have to play better. And that's going to be what keeps them in games. Obviously, like I said, they're opening night against one of the best passing teams in the league, so we'll see how much progress is made. But obviously, Deshaun Watson is the key to this whole equation. They go as Deshaun goes, and we'll have to see how far Deshaun can take him this year, as they like to call him the Michael Jordan of football.
And then the last team in the division of the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts, obviously coming in with Phillip Rivers as their new head guy, obviously 2 years ago, losing Andrew Luck before last season, having to start over at the quarterback position. They brought in Phillip Rivers to be the guy. They're in a win-now mode. They have one of the best rosters in the NFL, one of the top 5 offensive lines. They have 2 good running backs, complementary receivers, and a very good defense. And they're thinking Phillip Rivers is the guy we need to at least get us in the playoffs and compete for a championship. Obviously, I have nobody said this entire offseason, but I'm going to say this: watch out for Jacob Eason. I feel like the people don't talk about the pick too much, but I feel like they could be developing him to potentially take over for Phillip Rivers when he goes in a couple of years. And if that does, that would be great for him. Obviously, knowing his story from Georgia to Washington and getting to the pros, but I think the Colts are going to be fine moving forward, and it will be interesting to see where they end up as a team. Because roster-wise, they're the best roster in the AFC South. I think everybody can agree on that, roster-wise. But if we're going to go with divisional rankings, I'm going to go with the Colts winning the division. And then I have Tennessee finishing second, Houston finishing third, having a downward season. But I feel like 2 and 3 could flip-flop easily. And then I have Jacksonville obviously finishing last in the AFC. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Now we're going to get to the NFC side of things here on the podcast. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we wrapped up our AFC division predictions, rankings. As I talked about all of the AFC divisions and discussed my thoughts on each team, brief thoughts on each team, and gave you who I think and how I think the divisions are going to finish by the end of this year and all of that. So, that was that. Now we're going to switch over to the NFC side of things, and we're going to talk about all the divisions on the NFC side. So, we're going to start with the NFC North. That consists of the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions. So, getting into it, the Chicago Bears are in a very weird situation, I would say. Defensively, they have one of the better defensive teams in the league. So defensively, they're championship ready. Their biggest issue is on the offensive side of the ball. Mitchell Trubisky seems to not be who they thought he was going to be, and that was their franchise quarterback to take them to the promised land. So this offseason, they made a trade for Nick Foles from Jacksonville, and a lot of people are projecting that Nick Foles was going to win this starting job because they feel like the coaching staff has already given up on Mitchell Trubisky. But even with Nick Foles as the quarterback, there isn't still many expectations for the Bears to do better than what they did last year, if not do the same, which was around 500. Obviously, Matt Nagy, it's really a crucial year for him because he was supposed to be this offensive innovator who helped Mitchell Trubisky get to that point. And now there's even questions if he really is that good as an offensive guy based off of the fact that Mr. Trubisky regressed. But it could just be a Mitchell Trubisky thing.
offensively, I feel like they're a decent team. Defensively, they're going to be in games. But they just have to play better offensively for them to really make something happen. And I think they all know that. If you want to talk about the Detroit Lions, Detroit has been the team that either you think they're going to be a surprise team or you think they're going to be the worst team. I've heard a lot of that. I've never heard, oh, we don't know. A lot of people are saying they're either not going to be good at all or they're going to be a team that could really surprise some people this year. Obviously, they still have their returning quarterback, Matthew Stafford. They drafted DeAndre Swift with Kerryon Johnson. They have two good receivers, especially Kenny Golladay, Golden Tate. You know, all them. They're pretty good. And so offensively, they can make some things happen. Defensively, Matt Patricia is a defensive guy. They have some very nice defensive pieces on their roster. Now, they did trade Darius Slay. But outside of that, they have some pieces on the defensive roster that a lot of people like. And so people are thinking that they could be a team that could sneak up on some teams. Because obviously it's easier in that situation because Detroit probably, in a lot of people's eyes, is not taken very seriously by, you would think, the majority of the NFL when it comes to if you have them on your schedule. So Detroit has that potential to sneak up on some teams and maybe surprise some people. But we'll have to see. The Green Bay Packers obviously have a lot of controversy. And you would think that would be weird for a team that just came off a 13-3 season in an NFC Championship game. And it's not because really, realistically, it's not even like there's been a big roster turnover, new head coach, or any of that. It was all because they made a selection to select Jordan Love in the first round to be Aaron Rodgers' predecessor. And the fact that their draft was very offensive line running based and not adding receivers to help Aaron Rodgers now. So there's obviously been debate. Are they actually looking to get rid of him? Are they looking towards the future and not worrying about right now? Personally, I think they could be better. I feel like they're trying to make this an offense where they don't have to rely on Aaron Rodgers all the time. Where it's not like we have to pass it to win. They just found a running game with Aaron Jones. They just drafted A.J. Dillon to add more of a power running game. They're going to run the ball a lot this year in Green Bay. So when you go against Green Bay, you better buckle up. Because it's going to be a physical football game. And this is, I think, all based off what happened with the San Francisco 49ers. I think Matt LaFleur saw they beat us by just running the ball. They out physicaled us. Offensively and defensively. So we need to become a tougher football team and establish a power running game. And then obviously we're going against them in practice, and I'm hoping the defense will become tougher overall as they added some defensive players as well. And really this offseason, I think, for Matt LaFleur has been about toughness, being tougher. Because if we ain't tougher and we're not more physical, we don't stand a chance against the 49ers like we did twice last year. We didn't stand a chance against them twice, and I don't want to stand against them and not a third time. And then the last team in this division, the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, Minnesota really, again, hasn't made too many changes to the team. Obviously, they lost Everson Griffin, and they traded away Stephon Diggs, but they still have Adam Thielen, a number one receiver, and Dalvin Cook with Kirk Cousins at the helm. They're still projected to be one of the better teams in the division and still projected to be a potential playoff team when it's all said and done. Mike Zimmer is probably one of the most underrated coaches in the league, as he, day in and day out, always usually has the Vikings roster, one of the best rosters in the league, and usually tries to have them very well coached. Obviously, we'll have to see where they actually end up by the end of the season, but there definitely is expectations that they're going to be in a good spot by season's end, depending on what happens in the division, especially because this division is not looked at as that tough. If Detroit really isn't that good and Chicago's not going to be that good, you think it's going to be a two-man race between Green Bay and Minnesota, and so basically if they're going to be battling for that top spot, obviously you would have the projection of seeing Minnesota in there down the stretch when it gets to the later part of the season.
if I had to give my rankings on who I think is going to win this year in the division, I think Green Bay is going to win the division again because I just feel like they're still one of the better, if not one of the best teams in this division. And I just feel like they're still at more. I feel like the philosophy they're trying to go for now might actually benefit them long term. I'm going to go with Minnesota second. I'm actually going to take Detroit third this year in the division. And I'm going to go with Chicago last. I think Chicago's going to have to blow things up by season's end. And then we're going to go and get into the NFC East, featuring the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Washington football team, and the New York football Giants. Obviously, talking about the Washington football team, obviously we know what's going on right now in terms of an organizational perception, because a lot of things are happening with Dan Snyder, a lot of pressure on Dan Snyder to sell the team. But if we're talking about the football product on the field, Dwayne Haskins has already been named the starter for Week 1. This is his chance to show that he belongs in the NFL, as a lot of people think he's not that good. Obviously, Alex Smith is working his way back, so potentially could be a backup for them. But right now, Kyle Allen will probably be that guy. Adrian Peterson, the ageless wonder, still playing, probably going to be the main back this year for them once again. Probably sharing the load, obviously, since he is a little bit older in his career. Obviously, from a talent perspective, they added a lot of defensive pieces this year. A lot of better defensive players. So Washington's defense, I think, is going to keep them in some games this year. And obviously, that's Ron Rivera's side of the ball. So obviously, you know he's going to try to do anything he can to get that defense right. And the offense hopefully will come along. I think at the beginning of the season, because of COVID and training camp, you might see a lot more defensive dominating performances. And so that might actually bode very well for the Washington football team to start the season. Next, the New York Giants. Obviously, new head coach Joe Judge, with second-year quarterback Daniel Jones looking to take the next step together and also develop a relationship amongst the year. Obviously, they have a very good, solid group of receivers. Darius Slayton. I said Golden State for Detroit. He's not in Detroit anymore. He's on the Giants. My bad. But basically, him, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, if he can stay healthy. And obviously we know about the man, Saquon Barkley. It's one of those things where they have talent, but it's about putting it together. And kind of guy that really came onto the scene, nobody expected him to even be in this position. Is he going to flame out in New York under the pressure? Or will he take everything he's learned from the Patriots and Bill Belichick, implement it here, and it leads to success for the Giants moving forward? That's going to be one of probably the bigger questions moving forward with this team. Then we have the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, Dallas added a lot of talent, lost a lot of talent. Obviously, we know Dak Prescott's back under the franchise tag. Ezekiel is looking to have a bounce-back year. They drafted CeeDee Lamb, one of the better, biggest playmaking receivers of this year's draft, adding him with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Blake Jarwin looks like he'll be the number one tight end coming into it. Still probably has one of the top 10 offensive lines in all of the NFL. Defensively, they added a lot of guys. Dotari Pope. They lost Gerald McCoy, though. Alden Smith, they added him. Obviously, D. Lawrence is going to be back. And, they still got, Van Der Esch and that linebacking core, Jalen Smith. They lost Byron Jones as well, but like I said, they added some guys, and they're hoping to, with the talent that they have, because they have a lot of it, it comes together under head coach Mike McCarthy, and they finally, I guess you can say, reached the expectations that have been set for them for the first time in years. And then the last team, the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously they've already had a rough offseason, lost a couple of offensive linemen. They're not going to have a couple of receivers to start the season, so they're already starting out with injuries. But we've seen what this team has done with injuries. They were still able to make it to the playoffs with their offense being decimated, so I would not count out the Eagles. Even with that, Obviously, the biggest question is Carson Wentz. Can he stay healthy throughout the entire season? And then can he stay healthy into the playoffs? So that's going to be the biggest question for him. They have been the most battle-tested and most well-coached team, I think, in this division for the last 2 to 3 years, which is why they've been in the positions they've been in. And so, and I think that's also one of the reasons why they've always been able to have the Dallas Cowboys' number in big games. So for me, I think it shows. So we'll have to see. But if I'm giving my predictions on the division, I think that the Philadelphia Eagles will end up again winning the division this year. And I think, it's just going to continue for Carson Wentz having another great year. And I think once the offense can get healthy and stay healthy, you could definitely see a big statistical season from Carson Wentz as well. Dallas will finish second in the division, but I think they'll be a playoff team. I think the Giants will finish third. Again, with that 7th spot, they might be 8-8, and that might be good enough to get them in, depending on how good the NFC is this year. And then last, obviously, the Washington football team to end it out and round out the NFC East. But, as you know, it's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we'll finish it with the last 2 NFC divisions, the NFC South and the NFC West. So stay tuned right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we started discussing NFC divisions as we talked about the NFC East and the NFC North. Obviously, this segment we're going to get into the NFC South and the NFC West. Obviously, the NFC looking stacked this year, and these 2 conferences definitely, or 2 divisions definitely show that with teams. And so we're going to get into it first with the NFC South, baby. So, obviously, the NFC South consists of the Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, the New Orleans Saints, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, if you're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we know what the story is with them. They added TB12, Tom Brady, the GOAT. That's what they call him, the GOAT. At 42, 43 years old, coming into a new team for the first time in his career after 2 decades in New England. It felt like 2 decades in New England. And now leading the charge. Obviously, new weapons. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Rob came out of retirement for him. O.J. Howard. Just signed Leonard Fournette. Got LaShawn McCoy. There's a lot of big-name weapons on this team. They even made some improvements to the offensive line. This offense has all the potential in the world to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And with Tom Brady leading it, people are waiting for him to fall off that cliff. And if he doesn't fall off that cliff this year, the Buccaneers could be recipients of potentially a Lombardi trophy by the end of the year. The next team, the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers, a team that doesn't have the big names, the flashy stars, any of that. But I feel like they're just a solid football team. Matt Rule, new head coach, coming in here, sought with the control to rebuild this team, signing Teddy Bridgewater to a 3-year deal to be the new starting quarterback. They still have Christian McCaffrey, probably in some people's eyes, the best running back in all of the NFL. DJ Moore looking to continue off his second year as a number 1 receiver for the Panthers. Obviously, they've lost some guys, but they've added some guys. Their draft was all defense. So obviously, they're rebuilding that side of the ball. And I think they're going to maybe steal a couple more games than some people think. But obviously, they're very much touted as the team that probably will not be at the top of this division potentially. We'll have to see, though, because they're definitely a team I think is interesting to watch this season within the NFC South. Then you have the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, the Falcons, from a talent perspective, to me, is almost up there with the Saints and Tampa Bay. But their issue has been coaching to me the last few years. Is that they have never been able to get consistent coaching where both sides of the ball were playing well at the same time. It's only happened one time, which was the year they went to the Super Bowl at the end of the season. Outside of that, it's either the defense plays well and the offense is struggling, or the offense plays well and the defense is struggling. This is Dan Quinn's last year if they don't win. Arthur Blank was willing to give him a second chance after last year. If they come out the gate struggling again, you might see the end of Dan Quinn. Obviously, the Falcons are my team. And I feel like that's how it should be. Because we cannot continue to have this happening to us and thinking that it's okay to keep him around if we finish strong. With the talent we have with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Todd Gurley, Deion Jones, and all of them, we have to be better. They could compete with some of the best teams in the NFC, but we don't know if they're going to consistently. That's why a lot of people are putting them around 3rd place and 8-8 in division potentially. Because you don't see them really overcoming Tampa Bay or New Orleans, but at the same time, you don't even know if maybe they even top Carolina. This is going to be probably a very interesting year for the Atlanta Falcons to see what happens with them going into the future. And then lastly, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are a team, obviously, we hear what's happening with Alvin Kamara, saying they're open to trading him. Now they're in good contract negotiations. He's practicing. A lot of different things are going on. But talent from top to bottom, they're one of the best rosters in all of the NFL. Probably top 5 roster in the NFL, in my opinion. And I think that they definitely, have that potential. Obviously, a lot of people are projecting this to be Drew Brees' last year as the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. Listen, they got the talent. Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Jared Cook. Defensively, Cam Jordan's leading the charge. Marcus Lattimore is one of the best corners in the game. Demario Davis is probably one of the best underrated linebackers in the league. They have talent at all levels. It's just about putting it together. Because their issue has not been the regular season. Their issue has been when playoffs come, they have struggled. And they somehow always lose in just these fashions that really could just really destroy a team if you don't have a good locker room and a good culture. And also, the Minnesota Vikings have been their kryptonite in the playoffs as well. So obviously, you hope they don't have to meet in the playoffs again this year. Because that's almost like the ghost that continues to come back and haunt them. But the Saints obviously are looked at as the favorites with Tampa Bay for that reason. If I have to give my initial rankings on the season, I'm going to go with New Orleans Saints at 1 this year. I think they're still going to win the division this year. I think Sean Payton is going to get these guys ready to go and still be able to come out on top. I think Tampa's going to be second, but I think they're going to be a solidified playoff team, if not very close in terms of winning the division. I think the Falcons are going to be third. Again, with that 7th spot, you don't know how good the NFC is going to be. If the Falcons finish 8-8, 9-7, maybe even 7-9, would that be enough to get them into the playoffs? We don't know. That even opens up the door for Carolina, who I have last. But if they go 8-8, it's funny because, I mean, obviously this would never happen. But technically with this 7th wildcard spot, there is technically a possibility that all 4 teams from a division could get in. Which is, I mean, it's a possibility because literally every other division would have to be just as bad. But, you know, it opens up those doors for both of those teams. And would an 8-8 season in the Atlanta Falcons situation, but making the playoffs, save Dan Quinn? That's why I think that 7th wild card could really actually save some jobs, potentially. And then lastly, we're going to get to the NFC West. Consists of the Arizona Cardinals, Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers, and the LA Rams. So, the LA Rams are obviously in an interesting position. Sean McVay, in his 4th year as head coach, obviously hit the scene, was the hot new prodigy, young head coach, great offensive mind, led the Rams to the Super Bowl. Last year, they had a step back. There was offensive line issues. Goff didn't look as good as he did the previous year. Todd Gurley wasn't the same player. And there's a lot of questions about this roster. This is a older roster that doesn't have a lot of cap flexibility. And so there's that perception with them being one of the older rosters as well, does that potentially have them wear down towards the end of the year sometimes. And is Jared Goff really that good in a lot of people's eyes? Obviously, they even have their own issues trying to get Jalen Ramsey locked up under a contract. And obviously, I think they need to get that done because you don't want to leave your best corner that you traded 2 first-round picks for go in a free agency. So, that's a big thing for me. And so, really, the Rams are just in a situation right now where, yeah, it's funny because they have one of the best players in all of football in Aaron Donald, but he is only just a defensive tackle. He can only do so much. And it's kind of sometimes hard to kind of know where this team would be at the end of the day. It really is kind of hard to say where they would be in the entire NFC as a whole. Because they really could continue to regress, which would put Sean McVay's job in very much danger. But they could also move forward and bounce back from the year they had last year. Then you have the Arizona Cardinals, my big wild card team of the year. I think Kyler Murray coming into his second year is going to have a better year. They added a top tier target in DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, DeAndre is a guy who we know is one of the top 3 receivers in the game. You still got Larry, Mr. Old Reliable. Kenyon Drake, after having a breakout second half of the season last year, is going to be the full-time starter. Obviously, Arizona's issues were defensively on the offensive line. Defensively and offensive line-wise, we have to see where they are this year. That's going to be the key to them having a better season than they had last year. If that can improve and Kyler Murray improves, I think offensively they're going to be one of the best teams to watch and one of the most entertaining teams to watch on television this year and could really, do some things. Remember, they gave the 49ers some trouble. They gave the Seattle some trouble last year. So they definitely feel like they're just sometimes few players away from really making, I don't know if we want to see that next jump, but definitely being a very competitive team in the NFC West and the NFL in general. And then the other team, the Seattle Seahawks, obviously Russell Wilson, with him in there, they're always going to have a chance. Chris Carson is back. Their star running back. He looks healthy in camp. They just re-signed Josh Gordon. So obviously they added him back to the roster with DK Metcalf and all them. I mean, really, they're in a position where you know what it is. With Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, with them two still at the helm, they have a chance to still be just as great. And they're going to have to come out here and they're going to have to compete. They're going to have to compete. And, they're going to do everything they can. Obviously making it to the playoffs last year. And they were also a team that almost won the division and could have swept the 49ers. So, definitely a team you don't need to be sleeping on. And obviously the 49ers, I mean, they're Super Bowl runners-up. Jimmy Garoppolo back for his second full year as a starter if he stays healthy. Kyle Shanahan, a great offensive line. Obviously, there's a little bit of bitter taste after what happened in the Super Bowl. Some people worry about a Super Bowl hangover potentially, obviously, with teams that lose. But they still have one of the best rosters in the league, still have one of the best defenses in the league. You know, they still have, you know, George Kittle, one of the best weapons in all of the NFL. And they still have a very powerful running attack. So we'll have to see how they do in their bounce back year from the Super Bowl loss and see if they can really regroup as a team and move forward into the future and continue to be at the top of the NFC West once again. But now we're going to go ahead and get into it right here. And my predictions for the NFC West, I have the Seahawks winning the division. I have San Francisco being second. I have the Cardinals third, but I think they could sneak into the playoffs. And then I have the Rams actually finishing last in my division. I think the Rams are going to take another step back, and there might be some big changes that happens out there after this season. So that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, so those are my review of the entire NFC conference in each division. My rankings 1 through 4 in all 4 conferences, all 8 in the NFL. So if you agree with me, hey, go ahead and express your opinion on Twitter, GSMC_football. If you do agree with me, do it still also as well. But that's all the time we have here on the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Let me be part of your day once again. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Also, don't forget to leave a review or subscribe to the podcast. Definitely love to hear you and see you interact and tell us how we're doing and how maybe I can be a better podcast host for you guys. So this is your host, Brice, signing out, hoping you have all a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.